There is a broad variety of tools you can use for agentic engineering, so for working on code with help of AI. And amongst the most popular these days, of course, are Claude Code, OpenCode, Cursor, and Visual Studio Code with GitHub Copilot. Of course, there also is Google Anti-Gravity, there is Codex, Gemini CLI, and you know what? These are the tools I've used a lot over the last couple of months, though simply because I continuously want to test what's available and how well these tools work. I've built actual projects like buildmygraphic.com and more projects which are about to be released soon, and many internal projects. And I've built entire courses like this one here, which I recently updated, where I dive into Cursor and GitHub Copilot, or this one here, which I released yesterday, where I dive into Claude Code. But in this video, I want to give you an overview of these tools, their different capabilities, and my opinion on them. And the first important difference, of course, is that we can kind of divide them into two camps, if you will, because we have the CLIs, or TUIs, the terminal user interfaces or command line interfaces, and we got those IDEs here. Now, to be fair, OpenCode actually has a web mode too. So you can start a local server on your system and then use a web user interface for working with OpenCode. But the default mode in which I've only used it is the TUI mode, which is then the same kind of mode you have with Claude Code. So where you run OpenCode after installing it in one of your projects, and you then interact with it from inside your command line, inside your terminal, just as it's the case with Claude Code by default. It's worth pointing out that both OpenCode and also Claude Code have IDE integrations, so they can integrate with those IDEs and, for example, show code changes or previews of the intended code changes in the IDE, or allow you to interact with them in an IDE. Those integrations exist, but I think it's fair to say that they're really optimized and primarily built to be used from the command line, from the terminal, therefore. So that's what I mean when I say they are CLIs or TUIs. Terminal user interfaces. One important reason for why Claude Code and OpenCode are primarily built for the terminal, or to be used as an extension in existing IDEs instead of being VS Code forks like Cursor or Windsurf, for example, are, is of course that for the developers, this gives them more flexibility, you could say. They don't need to worry about all the features an IDE needs to have. Instead, they can focus on building good agents, good tools that can help you generate and edit code with AI. Now, of course, one downside, if you want to call it like this, is that, of course, these IDEs therefore offer a bit more than just AI agents, just chat interfaces for you to interact with. Cursor, for example, has amazing auto-completion, where you can really fly through your code base by hitting tab, 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 and applying edits in an entire file and even across files. And I would say GitHub Copilot has decent auto-completion. It's definitely worse than Cursor's in my opinion, but it's also good, and most importantly, it's there because, of course, with these CLIs with Claude Code and OpenCode, there is no auto-completion in your editor, at least not powered by these tools. They are instead agents or agentic tools, which means that you interact with a chat that triggers AI, you could say. So that is what these tools are. And of course, Cursor and VS Code with GitHub Copilot also offer that. In addition to the auto-completion, you have that sidebar here in VS Code where you can interact with GitHub Copilot, and you have the same in Cursor, of course. But with OpenCode and Claude Code, that is your primary and only way of interacting in the end. Now, of course, since they are AI agents in the end, or since they are about agentic engineering, one of the questions that matters the most is which AI models are supported by these different tools. And here, for Claude Code, that is essentially Anthropic's models, so talking Haiku, Sonnet, and of course Opus there. And because Claude Code is by the same company as these models, Anthropic, the integration is of course pretty good, and these models in my experience tend to work really well in Claude Code. And I'm saying that because of course these same models are also available in these other tools. When using GitHub Copilot, I can of course select those Anthropic models as well, but they run in a different harness here. They run in the GitHub Copilot or the Cursor harness or the OpenCode harness. And all these harnesses are also good, but especially that combination of Claude Code with those Anthropic models is really good in my experience. It is worth mentioning though that very recently there also has been an announcement that Claude Code also integrates with Ollama. And in case you don't know, Ollama is a tool that can be used to run open AI models on your system, if your system is capable enough for that, of course. So you can, in theory, use Claude Code with open models, which kind of makes it free because they're running on your system. You're only paying for your electricity there, of course. The downside is that these models, at least right now, are typically not as capable as the Anthropic models, especially like Opus, for example. And even if they are or were, we would be talking about models that need lots of GPU RAM, lots of video RAM, and quite capable hardware resources in general, to put it like this. So they would not run on your laptop or your Mac Mini or whatever it is. So that's worth noting, but the support is there. And of course, depending on your system and the development of future open models, that might be a viable option. So we also have that Ollama support here. Now, you can also use Ollama with OpenCode and Cursor and VS Code, and all those other tools also support lots of other models. I mean, in OpenCode, if you just type models, you'll find a very long list of models to choose from different providers, and most importantly, also from different subscriptions you may have. Now, there has been a time where you could use OpenCode with your Claude Code Max subscription, for example, and you could use those Anthropic models in OpenCode through that subscription, which was pretty nice because I personally actually prefer the UI and in many parts also the behavior of OpenCode over Claude Code. I think OpenCode is a really amazing piece of software. It's also open source, by the way. I'll get back to that. But Anthropic cracked down on that, and you can no longer use your Claude Code Max subscription in OpenCode. You can, for example, use your GitHub Copilot subscription though. So you can use that subscription here with OpenCode, of course, also with GitHub Copilot. And that, of course, is pretty nice because then you have that subscription model, which you already may be paying for, and you can try those models in OpenCode besides using them, of course, in GitHub Copilot in VS Code, for example. So that's pretty nice. But no matter which payment model you're using, you have access to many, many models in all these three tools. Not so much in Claude Code, though. Now, I already just mentioned it. OpenCode is open source. It is open source, and the advantage of that, of course, is a very transparent development, a very community-driven development, rapid innovation, though I will say that's true for all these tools, essentially. Maybe GitHub Copilot is lagging a bit, but they're also very quick at catching up and implementing all the features other tools may be adding. But nonetheless, it's pretty nice that OpenCode is an open source alternative, community-driven. Nonetheless, OpenCode also offers a subscription. There is OpenCode Black, which offers different tiers, just like the Anthropic or the GitHub Copilot subscriptions or the Cursor subscriptions, of course, to give you some included usage so that you don't have to pay for the actual usage, but instead you have a flat fee and then some included usage, so to say. So that's available here as well, even though OpenCode is open source. So we have paid subscriptions available for Claude Code, OpenCode, Cursor also has them, and also there are subscription plans for GitHub Copilot. Now for Claude Code, you need a paid subscription. For OpenCode, it is optional. And as mentioned, you can also use your GitHub Copilot subscription in OpenCode. That is an option too. What's worth noting here is that, of course, OpenCode is pretty much the only tool that needs to be profitable, I would guess at least, because it's not a big VC funded company or anything like that. It's not Microsoft, like in the case of GitHub Copilot. So they kind of have to find a model where they make money with those subscriptions. Claude Code, Cursor, and I guess also GitHub Copilot in the end are all heavily subsidized by their companies because they're either VC funded or Microsoft. So you get probably a bit more usage out of your Claude Code, Cursor, and GitHub Copilot plans than you may be getting out of OpenCode. But that, of course, also depends on which models you're using and so on. And it may not actually be a problem. Now let's talk features. Which features are supported? The short answer is if there's a good feature in one model, the others are quick to catch up. Now, to me, it seems as if Claude Code has been the driver of many new features. So has to some degree been Cursor. GitHub Copilot tended to lag behind a bit. But if we look at features, which I, by the way, also all cover in my recently released Claude Code course and also in that AI for Developers course I mentioned, if we look at features like sub-agents, if we look at features like agent skills, they are supported by all these tools. So you will find respective entries in the documentation of OpenCode and also of all the other providers. So they all have these features available. The one thing worth noting maybe is that in case of OpenCode, agents is a term that kind of comprises two things, you could say. It's a combination of different modes in which you can run OpenCode and agents to which work can be outsourced. In Claude Code's case, an agent is really just a sub-agent that's invoked to perform a specific task, like explore documentation, for example. In OpenCode, you have different agents through which you can cycle with the tab key, for example, to switch between plan mode and edit mode. So you have a plan and an edit agent. In Claude Code, these things are called modes. So that's something worth noting, but ultimately you'll find all these features like agents and skills in all these tools. And if it's missing in one tool, you can be sure that it will soon be supported. The same is true for memory or rules files. They are also supported in all these tools so that you can set up files in which you set up some general rules that should always be followed, or where you share some learnings that should be considered by all chat sessions. Here in Claude Code, it's the Claude MD file, and you can also set up some rules in a rules directory. But in OpenCode, that would be the agents MD file and also the Claude MD file. So that supports both. Agents MD is in theory an open standard, which is indeed supported by Cursor as well. So we have Agents MD in Cursor as well, and also in GitHub Copilot. Cursor then also has its own Cursor rules, and GitHub Copilot has its own GitHub Copilot rules. So that's there in addition. Here, that would be my Claude rules. So those are not compatible. And that's kind of the annoying part here. As you see, in theory, Agents MD would be compatible and would be shared, but Claude Code plays Apple here and doesn't support Agents MD. Instead, it has Claude MD, but that is supported by OpenCode, but not by the other tools as far as I know. So yeah, that is kind of annoying. And in general, also when it comes to these agent skills, for example, they are supported by all the different models, but they have to be stored in very different folders. So for example, when you're using OpenCode, you would store your skills in an OpenCode skills folder, or in Claude skills, it does support that for compatibility. If you're working with Claude, it's just the Claude skills folder that is supported. With Cursor, it's Cursor skills or also Claude skills or Codex skills for that compatibility, but not OpenCode skills. And with Visual Studio Code and GitHub Copilot, it is .github skills or also Claude skills. So Claude skills works everywhere, but as you can also see, we're still in that age where a lot of things are still evolving and every provider tries to have its own configuration, its own settings, and enforce that upon others. So yeah, That will definitely change in the future, and I'm sure in a year or two it will all be way more standardized, but right now it's lots of different folders and lots of things to look up in the documentation, and of course things also change frequently, and when this video comes out some things may already be different. For example, these tools also all have support for MCP servers, so that you can, for example, install the Playwright server to give them browser access. They have access to web fetch, so they can send web requests, so that you can, for example, tell them to go to some documentation page and read the content from that page. So that's of course useful. And therefore, ultimately, from a pure feature perspective, from my experience, there aren't a lot of differences. Sure, configuration settings may differ. Some niche feature may exist in one tool but not the other. But when it comes to the main features on which there is some consensus that they are good, they are typically supported in all the tools. And as I mentioned earlier, if a good feature is added and is missing in one tool, you can be sure that it will be added there soon enough too. But what about the quality of these tools? What's my verdict on these tools? Which one should you use? Which one produces the best results? I'm sorry, but ultimately, all these tools are decent. Super boring answer, I know, but what should I do? They are all decent. I've used them all, and there is no tool here where I would say that's horrible. As I said initially, in my experience, Claude Code works really well, especially when used with Opus, because it's the harness by the same company that built the tools. You can kind of feel that. You get really good results out of Claude Code with those Anthropic models. I also will say, though, that there was a period where I felt like GitHub Copilot gave pretty good results with those Anthropic models, to some degree better, but that's also very subjective and may depend on the exact project you're working on. Now, what I definitely do like is that with OpenCode and Cursor and GitHub Copilot, I can also use other models. Because, for example, there is the GPT 5.2 Codex model. I think that's the name. It's an amazing model for coding that's not available in Claude Code, that is available in these other tools. And it's a model I like a lot. I like to use that, for example, for more complex tasks. So that's when I switch over to OpenCode. I have a GitHub Copilot subscription, so I can use that through that subscription. Or with a Cursor subscription, you can use it in Cursor. So that is when I would switch, when I want to use a model that's not available in Claude Code. Or, I'll also be honest, sometimes, or for certain tasks, I prefer having an IDE because I know that I'll need to do more edits on my own, because I want to have a nice div view. Of course, Cursor and GitHub Copilot, once they're done with their changes, give you a nice overview of what changed, and you can accept or deny these changes on a change-by-change basis. And there are certain tasks where I like having that, so that would be situations where I use these IDEs instead. If we're just talking about the code quality, then again, as mentioned, I can't really say that one tool is worse than the others. It's AI, and I've had very bad results with all of them. I had good results with all of them. And the most important part will always be your prompt, the context you provide, that you use features like agents and skills. Especially skills can be very useful for providing extra knowledge. But that, of course, then applies to all these tools. That is your task as a developer, because we're not talking about vibe coding here. We're talking about agentic engineering, where you leverage your skills as a developer, where you try to give the AI information it can work with, and where you review the solution the AI came up with. And here, all these tools can do a good job.